glad that you all found it. Thanks for coming out. So this was inspired by Lana's Kinda Out of Luck and the brave women that I met while working as a traveling model. Richard's a hugger. He sticks my head against his chest, wraps his arms around me and sways, forcing me to move with him. His shirt is sweat-drenched, reeking of menthol cigarettes and aftershave. I hope you don't mind. I don't want to end up on the blacklist or anything. I force a smile. Of course not. It takes their breath away, meeting me, seeing me for the first time. They seem compelled to touch me, as if to confirm I'm real, not just some internet-born fantasy. Richard's hand lingers on the small of my back. He examines me then, eyes moving up and down my frame. Your pictures don't do you justice. I'm not flattered, but I pretend to be. Thank you. Like his hand, his eyes linger a moment too long. They're piercing blue, ice white, cut with red veins, lined by wrinkles. Richard doesn't look like a predator. He looks more like a cruise ship passenger, with his sunburnt skin, white hair, khaki shorts, and Hawaiian t-shirt. He wears a convincing enough smile, plays polite, and offers to take my bags. I decline. With a shrug, he turns and leads me down a hallway, the walls of which are dotted with wedding pictures of strangers and dog portraits bearing his watermark. The hall leads to his studio, which is little more than a home office with a backdrop hanging on one wall, a stool, and some studio lights. It's dim, cut by streaks of diffused light that highlight the dust in the air. Even minimally furnished, it feels cramped with just the two of us. Richard closes the door behind him, grabs my bags, and asks, "How was your trip? How was Portland?" He says nothing of the weight of my luggage. I relax once he sets it down. It was good, fun. I met and worked with a lot of talented people. You worked with Brian Stacks, right? I love his stuff. He's digging, hoping I'll share a bad story. I don't care to indulge him. Yep. I can't wait to see what you did together. Something moves behind him, drawing my attention. He turns, offering me a better view. It's a bird, a parrot of some kind, too large for its cage. Light blue with the white face and breast and orange beak. That's Ruby. She's a Quaker. Ruby flaps her wings. Ruby! I step past Richard toward the bird. Is she nice? Sometimes. Ruby cocks her head as I approach, stirring in her cage. Her feathers are the same shade of blue as Richard's eyes. As if summoned by my thought, he appears behind me, his breath hot on my neck. It startles me. He laughs, and Ruby echoes the sound with a cackle more unnerving than cute. I didn't know parrots could laugh, I say, catching my breath. She can do more than that. Watch this. Richard presses his face against the bars of the cage and makes a sound like a cat's meow, or tries to. It sounds nothing like a cat. Not even Ruby is convinced. He tries again to no avail. He turns to me, embarrassed, then stares past me at a cat I hadn't noticed. An old thing with greasy fur, it glares at him from its perch atop the couch. Richard glides past me, grabs the beast by the neck, and holds it up. The cat yowls. Ruby mimics this, too. Richard drops the flailing cat and turns to me with a grin. Did you hear? I nod, because I do not wish for him to try again. He seems disappointed by my reaction. She knows more, but only talks under certain conditions. She and I have that in common. The joke does nothing to diffuse the tension. Ruby's voice cuts through the budding silence. Take off your clothes! We both turn toward the bird. Richard laughs and hurries over to the cage. She's getting ahead of herself. Paperwork first, then pictures. He puts his hands on my shoulders and turns me around, directing me toward a stool, which squeaks beneath my weight when I sit, drawing another laugh from Ruby. Richard grabs a piece of paper off his desk and hands it to me. Looks like a standard modeling contract. I sign without reading and pass it back. Richard frowns. No, honey, I need your real name. This is a legal document, not Instagram. He taps my signature on the page and hands it back to me. I bat my eyes and force a smile. Lola Love is my real name. He doesn't believe me, but won't press it. Hard to argue against a fake name when you're willing to lie about age. All right then, Lola. Ruby squawks and repeats my name. Lola! Laughing, Richard pats me on the shoulder. You hear that? She likes you. I shoot the bird a glare as Richard walks away, humming the Kinks song of the same name. He sets the contract on his desk and fishes a wallet out of his many pockets. Remind me your rates? We've discussed rates 3 times. 100 an hour. And for nude work, 150. Smirking, he pulls 2 bills from his wallet and tosses them my way, both hundreds. A tip. 4. Taking the time to indulge an old man. May we start with some portraits? He gestures for me to sit on the stool. I nod and do as he asks, pocketing the cash while he prepares his digital camera. He tests to make sure it's synced to the lights, then circles me, once, twice, 3 times. Finally, he comes to a stop before me and hits the shutter, blinding me with the flash. He reviews the photo immediately, frowning, then turns that look on me. Before I can ask what's wrong, he comes toward me and tucks a strand of hair behind my ear. There, that's perfect. It's a test, this gesture, one I let slide. Thank you. It's not the response he expected. You seem nervous. I am, a little. I haven't done this in a while. Would a drink help? We only have so much time, and I want you to feel comfortable. May as well take him up on the offer. Only on the condition that you join me. Of course. He keeps a bottle of whiskey in his desk drawer, which he pours into waiting glasses. Smiling, he hands me a drink. I down it in one and hand it back. His grin grows, and he trades me the empty glass for his full one. Whiskey makes the job easier. Richard pours himself another, lifts his glass in salute, and takes a sip, wet lips smacking. I join him. Are you married, Richard? He thinks I'm flirting with him. With reluctance, he wags his fingers, displaying a gold wedding band. 30 years now. And where's your wife right now? Out. Out where? Oh, I don't know. Wherever it is women go when their husbands give them a little money and tell them to get out of the house. No need to worry about her. She'll be out for a while. We're isolated out here. Nearest neighbor is about 5 miles away, so we'll have plenty of privacy. Good to know. I set my drink down and angle myself toward the light. Should we get started? Thank you.
All right, next we have Trish Rusafi with Crazy Mary, which is I don't even know what to say about that story.
That's something else.
Yeah. That story, it's a lot of fun. I actually, when I read The Bell Jar, I thought it was kind of like okay, but I love Ariel. I'm sorry, I know everybody loves The Bell Jar. I'm not crazy about The Bell Jar. There's a lot of editorial problems. I'm like, I look at it and I'm like, oh, I can fix this. But when I read Trish's story, I was like, this is so weird. She's like literally like capturing like that flat voice. Like if she was writing this story like right now, this is what that would be. And she just nailed it so hard. And it gave me chills. So I was like, okay, Plath is like possessing me right now. And I have to put this in the sand though. And that's the story. Enjoy.
Thank you, Lisa. Would it be fun if I went into labor right now?
Possessed. Okay. Go like full exorcist.
There we go. Can you hear me? So, it's really great to meet all of you. This is a great book. And again, thank you, Lisa, for all your work on this. Basically, what you need to know, I'm just going to read some excerpts. It's a little bit nonlinear. Our narrator here is a student who's abroad in Florence. We're in the early 2000s. She's not doing so good. When I talk about Mary, we're referring to a statue, not an actual person, so just keep that in mind. So she talks to Mary, she's talking to a statue. And she talks back. Okay. Day 40. Slime on the concrete again, the sky a dull brown. On the way to Mary's, I see a rat the size of a large cat crawl down into the Arno, that filthy stream. I peer over the bridge, see the rat squirming its way into a pile of sticks. Mary, you get a bad rap, I shrug, staring into her hollow peach pit eyes. Some people think you're a whore. Others try and reclaim you, make you an idol for marginalized women. They try and give you saintliness, sanctification. But you never actually existed. If you did exist, you were at least 3 different people, maybe more. I get the symbolism. I get the mythology. I take art history classes. I'm a feminist. Mary sighs. People faceted. How would you like it if you had to be everything to everyone? Well, I'm pretty much nothing to no one. Just as much of a burden. Hey, what do you think of Titian's portrait of you? I think I look fat. If you believe the stories, I hung out in the woods for a really long time. You don't get glowing skin and pudgy cheeks from living in the forest and eating insects and roots. Plus, the guy Titian painted it for was a real pervert. He hid the portrait in his study behind a velvet curtain for private worship. Boy, that got old real fast. It's pretty insulting to be someone's holy pornography. I think I look fat too. I definitely gained weight. David said, well, you don't have to make everything about you, Mary said sharply. There are other things going on in the world. Day 78. I always end up in the cemetery. You can take the city bus up the hill, and there's a spectacular view, and then you could wander amongst the dead for a few hours. I always liked cemeteries, even as a kid. They were peaceful, magnetic. Some of my best memories are washed in cemeteries. When you can't get to a cemetery, an old church is best. Even if you don't believe in God, there is something comforting in feeling the worn benches, sucking in the wasted hopes of people who came here praying for their lives to be better, for their hearts to heal, for their children to walk, for their parents to sing. You can feel the itchiness at the altar, the worry in the wood. Light a candle and you can smell sorrow and the sulfur. There is a perfume with a scent like church sadness. I don't remember the name, but I bought a bottle along with some burgundy nail polish and coal black eyeliner. Day 90. I throw the Da Vinci Code out the window. If a student dies alone in Italy, does America hear her sputter? I know David hates me, but I slump down the street and under the archway to his flat and climb the stairs and shrug off my sweater and cram my body onto his dick and then stare at the ceiling, wondering whether that was a loss or a gain. His roommates argue in the kitchen. They are lovers. Nancy has eaten the last of the prosciutto, and Rita is angry about the lack of consideration. The door slams, and all I hear is the hiss of the radiator. Day 99. I turn 21. David and some of his friends take me to an Irish pub in the Santa Croce section of the city, which feels absurd. He gives me vibrant orange lilies as a gift, and I am overjoyed that he has remembered my favorite color. I drink an obscene amount of alcohol because it seems like the thing to do. I am convinced that I will die. I expect to be worried, but I'm not. That night, David drags me back to his apartment. I vomit all night into individual plastic bags that I pile into a neat stack in the corner of his bedroom. The next morning, I stumble into a taxi cab carrying the bags of vomit and the wilting orange lilies because David says there is no way I can throw my puke bags out in his apartment and there aren't any garbage bins on the street. The driver gives me a look so foul, I want to curl into my long hair like it's the thorny branches of a dark wood and sleep for 100 years. Thank you.
All right, Jerry Drake is next. He actually wrote a story first, and I was at AWP in DC, and he was telling me about why Lana Del Rey resonated with him, and he was like, it reminds me of all these girls in my hometown, and how they just end up kind of stuck there, and it was so beautiful and so depressing at the same time. I'm like, you have to write about this. I need a real thing. So he wrote a news story, and his news story was Karen. So this is his story. And it's a real story.
Let's see. Thank you so much. This story is sort of jointly inspired by Sylvia Plath and Lana Del Rey, who I sort of inject like heroin to stay sane in Washington, D.C. I'm not a professional writer, and I am honored and humbled to be here with so many talented women as the only, perhaps the only old middle-aged white guy on the stage. And so thank you so much for having me here. I might have the only distinction of being the only writer to write this story while the editor was asleep upstairs in my guest bedroom. So you get what you get. It's a very short story. But we're going to go back to a sultry Texas night in 1990. So I never flipped through my yearbooks from high school or Google people that I used to know. I'm looking at the faces of ghosts. I grew up in Teeth Rot America, Candy Floss America, the giant hyper-real suburbs of Dallas in the 1980s, flush with cash from real estate and petrodollars. Acres of ugly brown houses packed with pink people burning and rotting under the Texas sun. All the trees cleared away to make room for just one more development. The primary exports from that place and time were boredom and cheap labor. Most of the kids would fall in behind their parents and do the same things, burn and rot. There were always people who wanted to get away, and I was one of them. The escapes, parties, drugs, booze, promiscuity, and the naughty mischief of an artificially imposed adolescence. At 17, there was nothing more they could teach us, and we stood around waiting for our own lives to begin, killing time and trying to get laid. We just wanted to hang out and have fun. One of the best places was called Hell's Gate. Despite the sobriette, the spot was beautiful, located on Possum Kingdom Lake, just far enough away from our parents to get into trouble, and close enough to get out of if we needed help. The gate was a little out of the way inlet where the water is always calm. An island is just off the shore, which we all eventually tried to swim out to. Actually made it. Every Saturday night was a party. Campfires, college kids, old men with their bass boats, perving on young girls. There was always booze and plenty of weed, and usually a handful of needle jockeys trying to escape the claustrophobia of their addiction. The last time I was ever there was on a Saturday night in early October. I rode out to the place with two other guys in back of an old pickup truck, open to the wind, my long hair lashing my face raw as we roared down the highway. My friends couldn't hold their beer and were passed out in the back of the truck by 10. I just wandered around, long neck in hand, sipping beer, taking a few toques, and occasionally sitting down to listen to somebody's story or hear them pick a little guitar. By midnight, I was tired and ready to crash. I started back to the truck where I planned to bed down, weaving my way through the woods and parked cars. That's when I heard a noise. It was a girl's voice, a moan and a faint cry. I figured it was just some couple knocking boots in the back of a car, but something about the sound of her voice didn't seem right. I slipped through the field of parked cars. My eyes adjusted to the faint light of the stars. The sound was coming from a new white Mustang convertible with the top down. I heard a male voice as I got close. "Come on, baby, come on. Open up, yeah, open up." In the tiny back seat of the car, a boy about my age had a girl pinned underneath him. He was holding her by the wrists, his pants down below his ass, trying to force her legs open. Suddenly I realized I knew the guy. He was from my school. He was nobody, a poor little rich kid. I took my last pull of beer, flipped the bottle upside down, and hit him across the back of the head with it. I didn't knock him out. He let out a grunt and a moan as he started trying to get off the girl. I grabbed him by his shirt collar and yanked him out of the car. "Deacon, you piece of shit, get up. Get the hell up and put your damn pants on." What, you? Get the fuck out." Deacon fell on his hands and knees. I helped the girl out of the car. She pulled up her panties and tried to fix her hair. "Sleep it off, Deacon," I whispered. "Don't do anything you'll regret tomorrow." She was in shock, but was starting to get herself together. I held her by her shoulders, guiding her through the parked cars, and back to my buddy's truck. That's when I saw her face for the first time. Corinne. I knew her. Or at least she was in my English class. Corinne, leather skirts, spiked frizzy hair, heels, red lipstick, and pale skin. Corinne. The girl who laughed too loud and smoked in gym class and carried vodka in her thermos. Corinne. The girl whose image I held in my mind at night when I touched myself and made a mess on the bed. Corinne. Everything I thought I wanted and wanted to be. Freedom in human form. As I held myself next to her, I began to shake. My idiot friends were drunk and asleep in the truck. I reached into the space behind the seat and pulled out an unopened 5th 7 crown. I directed Corinne to a spot where a couple were sharing a campfire alone. I handed them 7 and asked them if they could beat it. I sat Corinne down on the log and stoked up the fire. She stared into the flames for a long time before finally looking up. "I know you. That guy from my English class. Poetry boy." "What?" "Sorry," she laughed a little. I don't know your name. A few weeks ago, you recited a most beautiful poem. It made me cry. I've been calling you Poetry Boy ever since. I grinned inwardly and recited some of the lines. I shut my eyes, and all the world drops dead. I lift my lids, and all is born again. I think I made you up inside my head. That's it? Did you write that? Me? No. It's Sylvia Plath, my favorite poet. It's called Mad Girl's Love Song. You must love it if you memorize it. Who's your mad girl? Oh, I don't have one. I mean, I had a girlfriend. We broke up. She left. Said I was too much trouble. Corinne smiled. Trouble? You don't look like trouble. You seem sweet. What you did back there with Deacon, that's nice. But I didn't need any help, okay? I can take care of myself, I guess. Oh, you jealous? Maybe you've seen me in class, Poetry Boy. My name is Chris. Chris, really? I'm sorry. I actually didn't want to fuck Deacon tonight. I looked into the fire and picked up a stick, moving a few logs around. Hell, why would you ever want to fuck Deacon? He's trash. Trash, huh? I bet everyone is trash to a boy who memorizes big poems just so he can recite them to pretty girls in school. She laughed again. Like I said, you're sweet. Deacon's not, but he's just a boy. This is the best life he's ever going to live. Me too, probably. Corinne got up from her spot and came over to my side of the fire, where she sat down, next to me, pushing her body close to mine for warmth. It's cold, baby. Let me sit here. I shivered, but not from the cold. My dick rock hard in my pants. I put my arm around her and held her tight. Oh, she said, you feel like a man, somebody you're going to make a real woman happy. I blurted out, I'd like to make you happy. She was quiet again, her brows knitted. I guess that's how it is. You saved me from Deacon, so it's your turn to take me. I suppose I wouldn't mind. Jesus, no, it's not like that. I don't want to do anything you don't want to do. I mean, I'm not him. Look, I've been watching you in class, and there is nobody like you. You're beautiful and free and alive. This whole fucking city is dead, and you're the most alive thing in it. I think I love that. She laughed a bit and looked into my face. You're a sweet, Poetry Boy. Give me another line. I dreamed that you bewitched me into bed, and sung me moonstruck, kissed me quite insane. You sure you didn't write that? She laughed again. But look, baby, I'm free. Ain't none of us free. I only fuck Deacon because he's got stuff I need. We all have things we need. Why are you out here, bored? That's why I'm here too. But look, you're going to go on and do something else, but not me, not Deacon. This is us, forever. I pushed my lips to hers and kissed her. I didn't care if it was wrong, and she threw her arms around mine and held me, shivering, together in that cold night by the last of the fire. When our lips parted, we sat quietly, the booze and weed from the night catching up to us. We fell asleep in front of the fire, and I did not dream. I had no reason to. The sound that awoke me at around dawn was Deacon's voice, calling out for Corinne. He finally found us and stumbled into our little stolen campsite. Corinne, he slurred, concussed and hungover. Get away from that piece of shit and let's go. No, I said, she's staying with me. Corinne was awake. I'm afraid not, baby. I've got to go. She stood up and pushed her hair up and her skirt down. I leapt to my feet. What, you can't go? That trash tried to rape you. Deacon reached into the pocket of his leather jacket and pulled out a baggie, letting it unroll in his fingers. It was a quarter full of an ugly, jagged white powder. Corinne smiled weakly and kissed my cheek. Like I said, Deacon's got stuff I need. I'll see you in class, Poetry Boy. She walked past Deacon and disappeared in the woods, leaving me standing there alone, eyes wet. I did see her in class, but she avoided my attempts to talk to her. Sometimes I could see her smiling in my direction and laughing privately at something I said. Then, after Christmas break, Corinne was gone. She never came back to school, and no one seemed to know why, only that she had gone. I always wondered what happened to her. I imagined to myself that eventually she had found a good man, settled down in one of those brown houses, and kicked out a few kids, all in imitation of happiness. Many years later, the night before I got married, I found myself possessed by the imp of nostalgia and plugged her name into Google. I never flip through my yearbooks anymore, or try to find what happened to my old friends and lost love. Theirs are the faces of ghosts.
Lots of fun, uplifting story. Wow. It's like a gut punch every time. All right, next we have Victoria Dalpe, and after her, Brennan Vito, and then we're going to have a break 10-minute break, and then we'll get the second half of the wonderful, depressing mess. It is the Saturday.
Hi, everybody. Yep, we can all go home and cry, and look in the mirror and smear our lipstick all over
Yes. Let's just go.
and realize it doesn't mean anything. So, all right. So my story is called The Wife, and I will read it to you now.
Woo! Everybody clap!
I'm getting over a cold, so I'm going to try not to cough, but no promises. I might just be disgusting through this whole process.
The story is fucked up.
Alright. She pressed her forehead against the glass, savoring the coolness, enjoying the way her eyelashes brushed against the window. Beyond it, she could see the street, gray concrete, wrought iron, the vibrant greens of new growth. It was a rainy spring day, and although she could not smell it, if she squeezed her eyes shut, she could imagine it, and she adored the smell of rain. "What are you doing, Vivian?" His voice startled her, broke her reverie, sent her head darting toward the doorway. The sudden movement caused the bandage at her throat to throb. Her hand fluttered to it absently. She knew there would be a face print on the glass advertising her guilt. He stood only a step or two into the room, his height and girth filling the space, stealing the air, and redefining the geometry to accommodate his mass. Even 10 feet away, even standing, she felt small. He did not move further. He just crossed his arms over his massive barrel chest and waited. Obediently, she stepped away from the window, and as soon as she did, she missed it. Every face that passed had a story. Every closed door she saw out there held mystery. Every shuttered window encapsulated another life. "You can't just spend all afternoon daydreaming at that damn window. Now come fix lunch. I have work to get back to." His voice boomed in the small space, and she hurriedly stepped toward him. But he blocked the doorway, and when he did not step away, she tried to push past him out the door. His arm shot out and stopped her. His massive hand encircled her entire bicep. She was aware of his strength, without him having to squeeze. Even now, when he was trying to be gentle, his hand was a vice. He simply wasn't built for gentleness. His every movement was a threat, purposeful or not. No kiss? She avoided his eyes and looked past him back out the window. He waited, his fingers tensing on her arm. Finally she nodded, turned her head, and she stared at his bulbous nose, ruddy and pitted, and his fleshy lips. Those lips would be womanish if they were on a softer face. She puckered and pecked, trying to be as efficient as possible, but he pulled her in, and he pinned her with his arms, and his mouth opened, tongue darting out past his lips and into hers. His stubble scraped her cheeks raw, and his mouth tasted sour. When he released her and she nearly fell back, he mistook it for a swoon and smiled wolfishly. Moments later, he was in the doorway to the kitchen. He watched as she set out the bread, leered as she stacked meat and cheese, grinned as she ladled soup into a small bowl and placed it on the table. He settled in, smacking his lips, and tucked a napkin into the collar of his dress shirt. She stood in the farthest corner of the room, her back nearly touching the blisteringly hot radiator. He ate, unquietly, and grumbled when he realized she had not provided him a drink. 2 large glasses of milk later, and he was up, burping and patting his stomach, then rubbing his entire face with the napkin like a towel. "That was lovely. Never thought I'd like having a wife at all. But I'm so glad I found you, Viv." She dropped her gaze and nodded. He kissed her on her head and strode out, the pots and pans jangling as his great weight passed by. When she heard the front door close and his footfalls on the sidewalk, she released the breath she'd been holding in. That night she tossed and turned. Nights were always the hardest for her. Every night he forced her to go to bed with him early. She was a night owl and spent most nights lying there, staring at the ceiling. She knew he feared her alone and awake in the house while he slept, and he did not trust her. He would not admit it, but she could tell. If she so much as wanted a glass of water, he would grumble suspiciously and come along. Something in her knew he shouldn't trust her. But the thoughts skittered away like shadows meeting light. She tugged at her bandage and tried to find a comfortable spot. Small, persistent thoughts circled in her head. He knew enough stories to be wary. She tossed and turned, too hot, too cold, entangled in bed sheets, and always his great weight, like a fallen log, pressing her into the mattress. She could hear the night sounds outside the window, fire trucks tearing through the silence, lone footsteps of predator and prey, cats in heat yowling, and she longed to be out in it. She longed to feel the soft caress of moonlight on her skin, the wind in her hair, the vastness of the sky. She had forgotten how long it had been since she'd been outside at all. Her dreams were always filled with flying. She'd soar through the indigo skies, streaking above the sea. Her reflection always raced her below in the dark water, and she'd dip down close enough to run her fingertips through the waves and feel its inky spray. She'd luxuriate in wildness, and she was weightless and unfettered. Then she would wake with tears on her cheeks, an ache in her heart, and the phantom salt air dissipating in her nostrils as the dream faded. It wasn't always this way. She remembered only fragments, but there had been a life before this one, a life where she laughed. She had faint creases at her eyes, laugh lines, so surely there must have been a time when she was filled with laughter. There must have been laughter enough to etch it into her face. But her memories were fireflies blinking in and out and eluding her capture, and the more she tried to remember, the more the pain at her throat forced her to forget. I'll leave it there.
All right, cool. So we have actually two no-shows. So Brennan Vito is up next. Where are you? His story is really sexy and really disturbing. So enjoy that. Yes.
Okay, yeah, hi, I'm Brennan Vidito. Please excuse the Canadian accent. So my story is called Stag Loop. In terms of inspiration, I read two views of a cadaver room, and somehow it led to this. Amanda found the film in the discount bin at the adult video store. The case insert was missing. Only a pale strip of masking tape scrawled with the words Stag Loop served to identify its contents. She bought it for $3 along with a handful of more legitimate-looking DVDs as a gift for her and her boyfriend Logan. When she returned home, the sharp, icy fingers of winter had dragged the sun into an early grave. The house was muted in shadow. The only sound was the rumble of Logan snoring upstairs. Amanda followed it to the bedroom. Nix was curled up at the foot of the mattress, purring ecstatically, and regarded Amanda with her golden green eyes. Amanda scooped the animal into her arms, turned to face the cheval mirror behind the door, and studied her reflection. Enough moonlight crept through the slit in the curtains to sketch out one side of her body. The result looked something like a work of scratch art, fine strokes of silver against solid black. Nix appeared to grow out of her chest, the jagged tracery of her pelt gleaming like polished steel. "Look at those beautiful ladies," Amanda said and kissed the cat between the ears. She replaced Nix on the bed, searched the grocery bag of DVDs, pulled out the one marked Stag Loop, and slotted it into the player. Logan stirred. Amanda checked her watch. He was supposed to leave any minute for the graveyard shift. She crawled up beside him and breathed hot breath in his ear. "Time to swim up out of those dreams," she whispered. Her eyes swished with television. The film was starting. The white flicker of damaged negative was replaced by a lingering shot of a 60s-era living room. The picture was yellowed and sepia and poorly lit. Amanda knew right away that it was a bad VHS transfer. The living room was furnished with a couch, garishly floral patterned, a coffee table with a white porcelain bowl in the middle, and an ugly Grecian urn off to one corner. A man with shoulder-length hair entered the frame. He waved impatiently to someone off camera. After a beat, the actress stumbled into the scene. Her hair was styled in a bob that framed her face in an inverted triangle. She wore a button-up dress and no bra, her breasts curved under the sheer fabric. Timidly, she approached her co-star and allowed him to undress her. After a mediocre blowjob, Amanda realized that vintage porn was closer to real life than the modern fare. They fucked on the couch. The scratchy background noise gave way to porn groove. Amanda let out a soft chuckle and recalled her attention to Logan. He groaned, threw an arm over his face, and Amanda rolled back the sheets to expose him to the night air. He was naked except for a pair of boxer briefs. His morning wood was more than a suggestion under the membrane of cotton. "What are you doing?" he said, his voice struck with sleep. Amanda kissed him on the stomach. His skin was hard and soft, the light smattering of hair tickling her lips. She moved up to his chest, planting little kisses along the way. He made a noise halfway between a grunt and a moan. His arms slid away from his face and their lips met. They kissed gently at first, Logan still only half awake, and then grew more urgent, passionate. His breath was stale, but it did little to deter Amanda's affections. Over the lip smacking and panting, the stag loop provided a comedic backdrop to their activities. Soon the music reached Logan's ears, piercing the blinders of his arousal. He laughed, a loud bark that sent vibrations down his stomach. "What is this shit?" he said, staring beyond her at the television. Amanda pulled away, lips plump and sheened in saliva, and followed his gaze. On screen, the woman had mounted the man in the cowgirl position, with her back facing the camera. She bounced up and down, throwing her head around in exaggerated paroxysms of pleasure. With a species of envy, Amanda noticed the beauty of the woman's back. Her shoulder blades stood out in sharp relief, softly pointed, sliding under the buttermilk skin with each thrust of her pelvis. A beauty mark fringed the slope of her right back dimple. At first, Amanda thought it was a discrepancy in the image, a scar in the negative, but then it moved in conjunction with the woman's flesh, startlingly black in that sepia world. "This porn is ancient," Logan said. "Where did you find it?" "The adult store," Amanda said, eyes lingering on the screen. "Don't worry, it wasn't expensive." I was going to say, amateur porn filmed in the dark looks better than this. This is just weird and creepy. "Because it's old?" Logan gestured toward the screen. "It looks off." "What are you talking about?" Amanda propped her head in her hands. "It's two average people having sex. He doesn't have an obscenely large dick, and her tits aren't big enough to smother a grown man. They're normal." Logan shrugged. "It's not that. I can't put my finger on it. Maybe it's the yellow tint or the shitty lighting. It makes her eyes especially, look empty. Maybe she was doped on something. Could be. This was the decade of peace and love, after all." Amanda playfully flicked Logan's cock. He flinched. "Well, I think she's beautiful. For a ghost, maybe." "Why would you say that?" Logan wagged a knowing finger. "I think I figured it out. The girl doesn't look real, but more like a cheap optical effect than actual flesh and blood." Amanda grinned. "You're thinking way too hard about this. It's a fucking porno." Logan sighed. "Yeah, you're right." Then in a sleazy accent said, "So how's about we bring our own porno to its natural conclusion?" Amanda said nothing, only lowered herself back down on Logan, filling the room once again with the sounds of their passion. Meanwhile, on the television, the long-haired man came on his co-star's chest. The picture sputtered to black, to be followed by the second scene in the loop. It was dark, gray tones. 2 men and 1 woman were arriving on a bedspread veined with wrinkles. A distorted porn groove rendition of a church hymn played in the background. As the larger of the 2 men penetrated the woman from behind, Amanda and Logan were already naked and moving together between the disheveled and twisted sheets. Thanks.
Wow. That was really hot. I'm gonna read the rest of it. But you'll have to get the book and read the rest of it. Since we have 2 readers that didn't show up, I'm gonna go with Manuel Chavarria, and then we're gonna take a break after that. So this is a very interesting story. I don't really want to say anything about it because I'll ruin it. So
I might ruin it too. Actually, do you
ruin it by reading it.
Hi everyone. So my story is called Dayglow Reflection. It was inspired by a song Lana Del Rey did with Bobby Womack called Dayglow Reflection. So you can get a sense of the deluge of creativity that's coming your way. I'm going to read a portion from the beginning. When Amy Kim stepped out of the shower that morning and wiped the fog from the mirror, she saw something different. Her cheeks were full and pink, her teeth whiter, and her hair, usually a mousy nest of split ends and dry strands, shone under the lights, a rich chestnut that became a deep green at the ends. The Amy in the mirror smiled and tilted her head, and the Amy outside followed suit. This earth-toned goddess was her best self, and having glimpsed her destiny, Amy vowed to beckon her vision from its hiding place beyond the clouds of condensation and into the proper world. In her room, she let her towel drop, and she stared down at her body. Her feet were too wide, and her ankles were thick. Her breasts were large, but lopsided. The mirror in her room told her different things than the mirror in the bathroom did. That transcendence was not a foregone conclusion, and that she could not simply assume that her flaws would be burned away under the harsh light that greeted her while she toweled herself off. That her dreams were not everything. Amy finished dressing and pulled her hair back into a long ponytail. The morning air was cold. Her ride to work was typical and drab, the road littered with rusting, frost-colored cars that absorbed what little sunlight there was rather than reflecting it back at the gray and desperate sky. Behind the clouds, the sun appeared indistinct and hazy, its glow dull, as if it had moved on, leaving only a slow and receding shadow in its wake. Amy stopped at the drive-thru for coffee, and as she waited her turn, while the man in front of her piled special request after special request upon his fucking coffee order, for God's sake, she pulled down the visor and flipped open the mirror to see if she was still beautiful. She wasn't. The dull gray outdoors had drained her of color, and what stared back at her was a dark-eyed wraith, hair like thin tentacles, and she half expected to turn to stone. The car behind her sounded its horn, breaking her reverie. The car in front of her had gone while she was distracted. She glanced in the rearview mirror, and the woman in the car behind her glared holes through her. Amy was embarrassed, but out of spite, she waited before pulling forward, and she didn't even raise her hand in a mea culpa. It was the small rebellions that kept her sane. She was the first one to arrive to work, which was not exactly out of the ordinary, but it happened infrequently enough that she always forgot to label her keys. She tried, and failed, to open the door with key after key. Getting to the last one had to be that one. Just as one of her colleagues got there, pushing her aside with a little giggle and a nod hello, the right key in the proper hole without a thought. Amy seethed, but she pushed it down and walked in behind her. Lauren, the blonde who walked with a little hop in her step everywhere. Up the stairs to work, hop. On her way to her car, hop. To the pseudo-Mexican place across the street to get a burrito, hop. Along piss-soaked sidewalks from which tent cities sprouted like fungus, as the city's economic pole snapped in half, each piece falling away from the other without even a fuck you shouted over her shoulder, hop. Lauren went straight for the Nespresso machine and popped in a pod. Her brow was smooth, her eyes light, and her smile never faltered. "Amy, what did you do this weekend?" Lauren squealed, her voice still the voice of a young girl. Amy exhaled slowly to avoid a sigh. "I was at home. I spent time in my patio with my cat." "Oh my God, do you have pictures? Can I see?" Lauren was taller than Amy, and she leaned into the space above Amy's head. Amy took a step back. Sure." Amy pulled out her phone, pulled up a photo, and then turned the phone to show Lauren. "Her name is Beatrice." "Beatrice! She's so cute!" Lauren screamed as she grabbed the phone and began swiping through Amy's photos. Amy whispered, "Be careful, please." Her voice was sandpaper and her eyes went wide, but Lauren didn't notice. She just kept smiling and her cheeks grew rosier. Amy looked away and caught a glimpse of her reflection in the break room window. She could see a hazy outline of the vision she'd had earlier that morning, but as she approached the window, the outline was overtaken by a dreadful reality. Her hair seemed tattered and worn and cracked like mud. Her lips were chapped. She was pale and drawn. She could see dark circles developing under her eyes in real time. Her phone was suddenly thrust back in front of her. "Who is that?" Lauren demanded to know. It took a moment before Amy could focus on the image floating in front of her, but when she did, she blanched. I don't know his name," she said in her smallest voice, and she could feel tears welling up, but she refused to release them. Not in front of this blonde monster. Never. "He's just this guy. It's just a picture." "Well, he's cute, and you should definitely talk to people instead of sneaking photos, you sneak," Lauren said cheerfully as she play-slapped Amy's arm. You can also use that thing to make calls, you know." She strode out of the break room and into her office, its off-white walls luminous beneath the spray of sunlight from the windows that surrounded her desk. Amy stood with a coffee cup in her hand. Her bathroom mirror was clear and bright in her mind. Upon its gleaming surface, she danced in a floral print dress, the skirt twirling out from her tan legs, her hair blowing in the breeze, strong and colorful. She closed her eyes tight so that she could hold on to the image. She carried it with her as she sat at her desk. After work, Amy took the long way home, following her usual detour, the one that placed her at the park bench across the street from the bookstore, where the guy in the picture worked. She'd liked sitting at that bench anyway, had read there once or twice, but she'd only begun regularly parking herself on it when she'd seen him for the first time. It was his walk that attracted her at first, slow but straight, sort of an amble, but with a sense of purpose that could be gathered if you looked hard enough. Amy liked that, and she liked that he was quiet. She never once saw him speaking more than a sentence to anyone. She saw in his behavior his own series of small rebellions, the kind that had carried her through so many days. She watched him move, his body lean and hard, she was sure. beneath a Black Sabbath t-shirt and a pair of blue jeans. She didn't believe in concepts like destiny. She was far too intelligent for that. But she knew, it had to be instinct, that he was a kindred spirit, another swimmer in the deep tide seeking a friend in a world that had outlived human connection. She hadn't yet been into the store. It was better to study his habits first, to be sure, wasn't it? This is not a world that rewarded uneducated guesses. She wasn't some dead-end idealist. She allowed for the possibility that he wasn't everything that her stupid heart had made him out to be. He stopped short and looked back, not at her, but in her direction. She froze, her lips peeled back in a grin that she could feel grow desperate under the risk of his stare. He scratched the back of his head and scanned the horizon. Once she felt sure that she was out of his direct field of vision, Amy lifted her phone into position and quickly snapped a photo. Soon he was out of sight, and she allowed herself to breathe. She gazed at the image on screen. She ran her 2 middle fingers along his strong jawline and across his thick, dark eyebrows. He saw her now, she thought.
And we're going to take a 10-minute break in which you can come and like paparazzi the writers or buy books or get liquor or go out for a smoke break. You got to do it all fast in 10 minutes. And then we'll have 4 more writers.